Police want to question a customer at a restaurant in Houston that shot and killed a robbery suspect on Thursday. Police say a masked robber walked into the restaurant and pointed a gun at customers, taking their wallets and cell phones.
As he was exiting the store, one of the patrons got up out of their seat and immediately discharged a pistol into the suspect.
The suspect died at the scene and had what police described as a plastic pistol. Police said the man who shot the robber is not charged at this time, but is wanted for questioning.
There have been people breaking down this shooting all over the internet. Now, what I have to say will be obvious for most, but it will undoubtedly piss some people off. Let me start off by saying that the Houston restaurant shooter is a hero, full stop. However, we need to break this shooting down legally, morally, and emotionally. All three can lead us to different outcomes, but I think for the most people, the outlier will be, was it legal? We're going to talk about the shooting in stages. Stage 1, suspect holding the gun, back turned, heading towards the door. Stage 2, suspect has dropped the gun. It's laying right here. He's laying motionless with his hands visible, or at least semi-visible, and our shooter starts closing in on him. Stage 3, the shooter picks up the suspect's gun, standing right next to him. Suspect hasn't moved, hands either visible or semi-visible. And that final shot I think is going to be our Good Samaritan, and that's what I'm going to call him from this point. That's what it's going to be his biggest issue. So let's go back to stage 1. Can our shooter defend himself or others when the suspect's back is turned, heading towards the door? Absolutely. What about the gun being fake? It doesn't matter as long as our shooter believed it to be real, and as if you look at the reaction of the people in the restaurant, they all believe it's real, otherwise they wouldn't be hiding underneath the table. What can our shooter articulate? CYA, can you articulate? Most of you know it to mean something else, but both are accurate. If you can articulate it, you can cover yourself. Now let's stop for a minute and talk about the AOJ triad. Now, Masoud Ayoob teaches the ability, opportunity, and jeopardy are integral parts to any self-defense claim. Ability, are they able to hurt you? Now, just about anyone can hurt you, so that's a given in most cases. Opportunity, can they get to you? Do they have a knife, but you're behind a plate glass window? This is one of many reasons that shooting through a door is a bad idea. Obstacles in the way of a person inflicting harm will always work against your self-defense claim. That doesn't mean you cannot overcome that, but it is harder. Can you articulate the threat to your life? Depending on the jurisdiction, you may have the responsibility to put obstacles in the way. For instance, in some locations, you have to attempt to flee before defending yourself. Enough distance can be an obstacle in itself, but not always. Now, this is a two-order drill, the 21-foot rule. Somebody with a blunt instrument or knife can close the distance in 21 feet that you can usually draw and fire from a holster. This is not true for everybody, but it is a general rule for typical shooters. Now, if you have the opportunity to put an obstacle in the way and you don't, some may consider that mutual combat, as Andrew Branca writes in his book, The Law of Self-Defense Principles. You can actually get this book semi-free on his website. You just have to pay shipping and handling. But it is definitely worth the read. It is one thing to be able to carry a firearm. It's another thing to know when you are actually legally able to use it. Now, if you engage in mutual combat, it seems that you're choosing to remain in the fight. So your innocence from a self-defense standpoint is taken away. Texas doesn't have this requirement, so it's a moot point for this case. Just keep this in mind if you live in a jurisdiction that requires you to attempt to escape. Jeopardy, the last one. In the law of self-defense principles, Andrew Branca says that even assuming we have spotted and can articulate ability, opportunity, a threat is not imminent unless there is also jeopardy. He has a gun, we see it, but is he threatening with it? Is he moving towards it? Is he pulling it out? Now, they have to do something that shows they intend to use harm against you. If you see a person who is open carrying in their belt, you have the first two elements. He has the ability to hurt you and the opportunity to hurt you. However, without any action that suggests he intends to, you cannot legally defend yourself. Sometimes this isn't clear, so it comes down to CYA. Can you articulate? You can take certain actions that force the person to act one way if they are a threat or another if they aren't. You can move away and see if they follow. Yell at them to stop. Don't come any closer. You try to do something that would cause a regular person to alter their course. Now, the tricky part about these is that it isn't a one and done. These have to be present throughout the entire self-defense act. If for some reason one of these three is removed, you are no longer defending yourself. So let's go to the second stage of this shooting. The perpetrator is laying face down, motionless, nothing in his hands, and our good guy is walking towards him. This is where it starts to get kind of questionable, because we're walking towards him, standing over him, shooting, and our gun is laying over here on the side. Now, depending on what our shooter saw, our Good Samaritan can still be okay. It may not be lawful anymore, but it can be forgivable. For instance, if he did not see the weapon come out, he could think that our shooter is still armed. But is our shooter able to articulate immediate danger by saying he believed this guy still had his pistol? He's still violating the law because there isn't any jeopardy, but that is often excused if there was jeopardy right before. However, closing the distance on our suspect is not a good look, because if you believe that there is immediate danger, you wouldn't be getting closer. Remember the obstacles, if we want to put obstacles in the way, but moving closer takes those obstacles out of it. Stage 3 is where our Good Samaritan is in trouble. When he picks up the perpetrator's weapon, it's going to be nearly impossible to articulate a continued threat against your life. Some people have said that he could have had more weapons, and I will give you that. However, he still has not made any move to pull them out. So let's go through the AOJ. Ability. He could have the ability, and we have seen people reanimate all the time, but this could be hard to argue. He's laying down, you've shot him multiple times in the chest and maybe even the head area. So is it really reasonable that he's going to get up and start attacking you again? You may have a hard time convincing a jury of that. Opportunity. Does he have the opportunity to hurt you? I would argue that's probably not likely, since you have the only weapon that you know of. But it all comes down to if he can articulate a danger, if he can articulate, oh, I saw something in his belt that seemed like a knife. However, jeopardy is going to be the hardest one to argue. He has not moved in the last several shots. His hands have not seemed to move in the screen. Now, our shooter can try to claim that he saw a twitch or he saw a movement on the other side where we cannot see, but the jury will have to take his word for it. Are they going to believe their eyes, or are they going to believe the shooter's story? This is a dangerous situation when you try to put your life in the hands of somebody who only has one view of something. Remember, this is a continuous assessment. You can't go through this once and it becomes a free-for-all if the elements are there. You can't just keep shooting him and he hasn't made any effort to harm you in the last 10 shots. If at any time the element ceases to be, you are no longer operating within the law of self-defense. So I believe this guy had a clear case of self-defense in stage 1. In stage 2, it is questionable but excusable, meaning he likely violated the law, but the jury probably wouldn't hold him accountable since he was just in a stressful situation that he did not choose to be in. However, when we get to stage 3, I think he unquestionably overstepped any plausible self-defense claims. He may be able to argue an accidental discharge, that he did not intend to pull the trigger, but his actions at the time caused his finger to slip, or he was nervous, or something along those lines, to where he wouldn't be directly responsible for the murder. He could claim it was a tragic accident, kind of like Alec Baldwin. I didn't mean to pull the trigger, it just kind of happened. if we watch his actions after he picks up the firearm, you can kind of see him stumble backwards, and it is a plausible defense. So perhaps he didn't mean to take that last shot. Now, it doesn't look good that he left the scene afterwards. He doesn't have to stick around, but if you leave the scene, it kind of shows that you have something to hide. Whether it be a weapons charge, you weren't supposed to have that weapon on you, you've done this kind of thing before, you've been in a shooting, you have a warrant of some kind. Okay, so the big question, does this mean he will go to jail? Well, it depends. It depends on the prosecutor. It depends on public sentiment. It depends on how fed up the city is with crime. But most of all, it depends on the jurors. This has gone to a grand jury, so if the people in the grand jury decide that he did violate the law, it could go to trial. But those jurors may decide that what he did was excusable, although it may have violated the law. So it may come down to, can the jurors overlook his errors because he was forced to use his gun in the first place? If the jury is full of people who don't think we should have the right to bear arms, he's likely going to prison, if the grand jury indicts him, that is. However, if the jury is full of people who are glad this man protected his fellow patrons, he won't. So what do I think will happen? I think he will take a plea deal for involuntary manslaughter or something along those lines and end up with just parole. It gives the district attorney a win. It lets him save face with the public and still hold someone accountable who overstepped the boundaries of self-defense. So I'm going to file this one in the illegal but will likely be excused folder. If there's another case you would like me to break down, my email is in the description. If you think I'm wrong, don't tell me how stupid you think I am. Tell me what you disagree with and why. Remember, I'm not arguing that this guy didn't deserve it or that this man was morally right or wrong for killing him. Only that according to the letter of the law, this man shot someone who was no longer posing a threat to him. Therefore, he broke the law. If I were on the jury, would I hold him accountable? It depends on other variables. Was he doing everything else right? If that's the case, then no, I'd give him a pass. Although he broke the law, he was in a situation that he did not choose to be in, and he took actions that he thought were right at the time. However, if he has a history of doing something like this before, like a questionable shooting, if he had a warrant, if the gun was illegal, if something along those lines, I think he should be held accountable to a certain degree. I'm not talking like 10 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. I'm talking like 6 months probation and a remedial pistol course to relearn the proper aspects of self-defense. If you do carry a firearm, remember CYA. Can you articulate? You have got to be able to explain why you pulled your gun out and why you opened fire. When it comes time to try to articulate to someone like the police, remember, first of all, to get a lawyer. But second of all, remember the AOJ triad. Do they have the ability to harm you? Do they have the opportunity to harm you? And is your life or somebody else's life in direct jeopardy? If the answer to one of those is no, then you need to protect yourself because the shooting is likely not a legal self-defense claim. You have got to maintain your innocence. You can't have mutual combat. You can't be chasing someone. You have to be the one who's trying to protect yourself at all times. The aggressor can change multiple times throughout a situation. For instance, if somebody is chasing you with a baton and you get behind a car and then they start walking away, you can't then shoot them because they're no longer showing you a direct jeopardy to your life. So you need to be constantly evaluating everything, because if you start chasing them, then you are the aggressor and they can legally use self-defense against you. So with that in mind, let's watch this clip one more time and see when our Good Samaritan oversteps. Perfectly in the right. Very questionable. I mean, that almost seems like an execution. That was an execution.